Hi, it's Jo here from Minerva. I'm here today to talk you through different sewing machine needles. I think some people think they've got a needle in their machine, that's all they need. But actually, there's a wide range of sewing machine needles and they're there for a reason because they're different sizes. And once you understand what the number is on the outside, you'll be able to choose the right needle for the right project. Today I'm wearing a version of a cocoa dress by Tilly and the Buttons. I've just shortened the sleeves and it has a neckline like that with a binding on. And the fabric is a mock cable. It's great. I'm a knitter, but I wouldn't knit a whole dress for myself. So when I saw this fabric, I really wanted it because I thought I can get the effect of a knit, but I haven't got to do all the hard work. It's really great fabric. Comes in a lot of colours. I don't think there's mustard left, but there's lots of others. This has been posted on the Minerva site and a lot of people liked it, and people have made sweatshirts with it, and they've posted up their makes. Don't forget you can post up your makes. The Minerva website isn't just for people who are modelling an attractively beautiful thing or trying out something really extravagant. It's for everybody who sews, so please don't forget to post your makes so we can all have a look. Lovely sewers, I cannot do this video on sewing machine needles without my glasses because I can't see the tiny writing on the needles, so specs on for this one. So sewing machine needles come in a range of sizes and they go from 60 to 110, and that's the metric sizes. So a 60 needle is the finest needle, and that is the finest fabrics, and the higher the number the thicker the fabric, so that just sort of makes sense, doesn't it? And then you might see another number on machine needles, which is an American sizing, which goes from 8 to 20. So for example, on a jeans needle, it might say 110/20, meaning the metric size is 110, so it goes to really thick material, and the American sizing is 20 because that's their thickest size of needle. So that's what the two numbers mean. So you might buy a pack of regular assorted sewing machine needles, but which one you select depends on what you're sewing. So this one goes from 70, which is a light fabric. There's two of those, and then there's 280, so that's going to be a bit thicker fabric, maybe a sort of thicker cotton. And then it goes up to 90, which is going to be a sort of cotton drill, a light canvas. So that will sew all your cottons depending on how thick they are. So here's an example of how different sized needles are for different thicknesses of fabric. So sharps are 60, so that will sew very lightweight fabrics like silk, a light rayon, a very light cotton lawn, lingerie fabrics, so that aren't stretched. So the sharps are really have a very narrow point on the end, so those sew really light fabrics. And then there's jeans needles, and you can see that they go up to 100. That's because they're stronger, they've got a sharp point on the end, they can go through lots of thicknesses. So that is 90 and 100. So those are obviously thicker needles for a thicker fabric like denim. And then this one's called a leather needle. And although it's the same sizing as the jeans, 90 and 100, that's got a different sort of tip on it. So that's got a sort of chisel edge tip. So when it goes into the leather, it makes a little slit punch rather than a round hole that would be seen in the fabric. So even though those two are the same thicknesses, they've got different tips on them for behaving differently with different fabrics. Although the needles I've shown you are quite speciality, one of the alternative needles you'll probably need to get is some sort of stretch needle if you're sewing any kind of jersey knits. And there's two types. There's a stretch needle and a ballpoint needle, and this stretch needle also comes in the different sizes, 75 to 90, and it's really good, a stretch needle, if your fabric has got any lycra content, or it's a lingerie fabric with like a two-way stretch, because it really stops your machine missing stitches. I quite often see on sewing forums beginners saying, oh, my sewing machine's skipping stitches and I've changed the tension, I've changed this and I've changed that, but actually they need to change the needle. And sometimes I put as a reply, change the needle, and I think they think just change it for a newer one of the same, but what I mean is you need to use a stretch stitch needle because that will make all the difference. A ballpoint needle has a slightly different tip, and as it suggests, it's got a rounder tip, and that separates the fibres in stretch fabric a little bit more. So if you're not having any joy, and sometimes it's a little bit trial and error, until you put your fabric under the machine and start sewing and realise it's skipping stitches or it's bunching up, then you might need to choose between these. But a ballpoint needle is also for stretch stitches, and it separates the fibres and is able to sew through rather than catching and sticking on stretchy pieces of tiny elastic. So some needles are thicker and thinner to go through fabrics, some have a different shaped tip. These two, a metallic and an embroidery needle, they have a different coating. So a metallic needle has a slightly bigger eye so that you can get a metallic thread through it, and the eye is coated so that a rougher metallic thread can slip through the eye of a needle. So if you're going to make something with a metallic detail on it with the thread, then you'll need a metallic needle, because otherwise your thread will keep breaking in your machine because it's just chafing on the inside of the eye of the needle. So those have got a coated eye. Same for this one. So embroidery needles have got a slightly bigger eye because you're putting through a slightly thicker thread sometimes, like a top stitching thread or a thicker embroidery thread. So they've got a bigger eye, so they're easier to thread up on the machine. And they're coated as well because they're going in and out really quickly, very close to the previous stitch. So you'll be wanting to make sure that the needle can slide up and down past the previous stitching or the stitching that's closest to it. If you're going to make a pattern that you know has top stitching, like a pair of jeans or a pinafore that has top stitching, or an apron maybe that has top stitching, then you might need to also purchase a top stitching pack. They are all 90 in this pack because that's a really strong needle to go through lots of layers, and it's got a slightly bigger eye so that you can put top stitching thread through, and top stitching thread is a little bit thicker than sewing thread. So you might notice on a pair of jeans, if you've ever had to turn a pair up or let a pair down, the thread is a lot thicker than normal sewing thread, so the eyes in the needles are a little bit larger. So that's quite a speciality needle kit, but you might need it if you're buying a jeans pattern and you're buying the denim from Minerva, and then you definitely need to put a packet of those into your basket as well, because that you know, top stitching is the finishing of your project, and if it's not looking good, then it's really spoiling the overall look of your project. This titanium needle, as you might suggest, is very strong and durable. This is a whole pack of medium-sized ones, so they're all 75, but they do last a long time. It has a slightly rounded tip, so if you're, you know, it really does depend. Sometimes you don't know until you get your fabric home. But if you're really finding something's not sewing very well, it might be worth trying a titanium one, because it's just got that rounded edge and it's got a strength that if you're going through thicknesses, that might help as well. So I have a little tip, because I can't remember what I last sewed, or sometimes I'm sewing different projects in between other projects. So on the side of my machine, I have a little bit of washi tape and a little post-it pad, and I write on there what needle is in the machine. So in here is a universal 80, because I was sewing some quite thick cotton poplin on a shirt, so I've got cuffs and collars, so I've got a lot of layers. So I had an 80 needle in there. Sometimes I do this. I actually use washi tape to sellotape the packet to the side of the machine, so that when I come to the machine, I look at the side and think, oh, it's those that are in it. And then I can take the stretch needle out, put it back in there if I've only used it for a little bit and I'm going to come back to it. So thinking you'll remember which needle is in your machine, I can never remember which one's in mine. So I put a little tip there, and that means that I'm using the correct needle for the correct project for the right fabric, and then I'm not messing around with tension, and I'm not worried that my sewing machine is breaking threads. I'm using the right needle for the right project. Okay, here's a little bit of fun. This is a little game called Match That Needle to the right fabric. So I've got a range of fabrics on the table, and I want us to think about which needle goes with which fabric. So I'm going to start up here. So this is some lingerie fabric. It's sheer. You can see the stripy one through it, look. Okay, what size needle do you think that needs? It's the lightest fabric, so it needs the smallest number, so that needs a 60 needle. It possibly might need a 60 stretch needle because that fabric is stretchy. Here's some gingham, just normal cotton, no stretch, medium weight, and that one needs a 70 needle out of your universal packet. This one we might all be able to guess that one quite quickly. That's from the jeans pack, or if your universal pack goes up to 100, you need a 100 needle for that one. This one is cord, so it's a very sturdy fabric, isn't it? And if you've got a couple of layers of it, it'd be quite thick. So that one we could use a needle from out of our jeans packet. Oh no, let's go 90 actually. So if you bought a pack of jeans needles, you could sew both denim and cord with it. You'd get 2 uses out of a new packet of needles. Okay, next one is a lycra swimwear fabric. So that's really stretchy in 4 ways. So we know we're definitely going to need a stretch needle for that one. But a stretch needle with a sharp point on it, that's what's going to cut through that. And we'll be going for a 75 there. This is just t-shirt material, ubiquitous navy stripe, making a t-shirt or long sleeve t-shirt. It's got quite a big stretch in that direction, and not so, oh sorry, a big stretch in that direction and not so much in that direction. So that's got a stretch, that's going to have a lycra content. And also when you sew some fabrics, if you were sewing this on as a neckband, sewing that way across the fabric might be different to sewing the other way. But that's definitely going to need a stretch needle. I'm going to put that one there. What have I got left? I've got some sweatshirt fabric. This is a fur-backed sweatshirt fabric. It's got a little bit of stretch, but not a lot. More in that direction than in that direction. And it's quite thick. You're going through a couple of layers there. So you're going to need a thicker needle for that one. This was the one that surprised me when I sewed it. It's a light cotton. So I just used a needle out of my universal needle pack, and oh my, it wouldn't sew, it skipped stitches. I thought there was something wrong with my machine, it was driving me crazy. And it's just a cotton lawn, so it's a very light cotton, so it's actually classed as a really fine fabric, so it needs a really fine needle. Last one here, this one's a bit of a trick on this, because this is a cotton polyester mix. I've made a pair of summer trousers in this. So you might think, oh well, that just needs a 70 or a 75, but it has got a little stretch in it. It's sometimes you see it called sateen. It's great for making trousers because it's got the look of a pair of cotton trousers, but you've got a little bit of give around the hips and the waist. So that, even though it looks like cotton, it does need a stretch needle if you can experiment. So you might be okay with a universal needle, but just with that added bit of stretch, you might need to use a stretch needle. How did you do? Has it helped you seeing different fabrics with different machine needles? As you become a more experienced sewer and you start using different patterns, you might need a twin needle, and it's 2 needles in a little plastic shaft that has the piece at the top that goes in the sewing machine, and the flat side goes to the back like this. You tighten it up, and then you will need to refer to your own sewing machine's instructions, but somewhere you're going to need to put a new spool on. So my spool on this particular machine fits on top of my bobbin winder, but I know on my other machine I had an extra hole where I could put that extra spool in. So I've got 2 spools running. I've tried to make them different colours so you can see. So I've got a brown in there and I've got yellow in there. I've got a brown bobbin down here. And you thread up your machine as it says in the instructions. So using the left needle and then the right needle. And then you can get a twin line of sewing that's absolutely parallel, which is great if you're sewing a hem on a skirt, or you're doing twin needle sewing at the bottom of a pair of jeans. And again, using all what you've just learnt about different sewing machine needle types, you're going to have to choose your twin needle carefully. This is a universal twin needle, so this is going to be sewing some cotton. But if I was sewing a neckband on a t-shirt and I wanted twin needle sewing around the neck, then I was going to need to have a stretch needle. And there's lots of different ones that you can try, and I'll show you them here in a moment. So my needle's all threaded, but the really key thing that you need to do is very carefully turn the handle and just check that your needles clear the gap in your foot. I have done it myself, got all excited, bought a brand new twin needle, got it home, set it all up, press go, and then snapped them both off before I've even sewn anything. So it's really important that with caution you just check that your needles don't need a different foot out of your machine kit, so that there's clearance for the needles to go up and down through the foot. So you will get a twin needle finish like this. A yellow thread and a dark thread there, just so that you can see. And on the back it looks like this. But it makes a really good hem on a skirt, if you're making a cotton skirt, to just put a twin hem around the bottom in a really good matching thread. It really does finish it off beautifully. Okay, so that's it for today. Make sure when you choose your fabric and your pattern, you also put the right needles into your shopping basket, because that will give you a really smooth sew, a project that's enjoyable and not frustrating. If you've got any other questions that you'd like answered from the Minerva team, please post them to us and we'll try our best to answer them. Thanks very much for watching. Bye.